Good to have you back for another edition of your weekly program on Africa 24. The African Union Journal brings to you updates on the actions of the African Union. On May 25, as every year, World Africa Day was celebrated, a day that marks the anniversary of the signing of agreements of the OAU, Organization of African Unity, on May 25, 1963, an opportunity for each country on the continent to organize events with the aim of fostering harmony among African people in order to meet the challenge of building a new, prosperous and peaceful Africa. Details in this report.
In a conference room of the University of Limpopo, a province located in the north of South Africa, traditional dances and songs to decorate the commemoration of Africa Day. On this day, in this high place of knowledge, several speeches follow one another to pay tribute to an Africa with enormous potential. For Chupu Stanley Matabata, the Prime Minister of Limpopo Province, a new way of approaching the problem of the continent is needed.
It is therefore our responsibility as Africans to change the way the world views us, and the start is now. In this regard, we align ourselves with the policy commitment of the University of Limpopo, Vice Chancellor. When you say your policy, your legacy or your mantra is that you want to find solutions for Africa.
The 25th of May is strongly rooted in all African countries, and it represents the symbol of a struggle of the whole continent for liberation, development and economic progress. Every year on this date, the current chairperson of the African Union Commission addresses the continent, a land of the future, which must rely on itself, mobilize its efforts, all in a synergy to be the destination that it really is.
L'Afrique de nos rêves. L'Afrique des routes, des autoroutes, des chemins de fer, des ports, des aéroports, des centrales électriques, des fermes agricoles, des produits pharmaceutiques et médicaux, des parcs industriels et numériques, mais aussi de la création artistique et culturelle et du génie sportif. J'invite particulièrement notre jeunesse à porter et amplifier le message.
For this 2022 edition, Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, has issued a message painting Africa under the prism of hope that it carries. Despite the crisis of several kinds, COVID-19 in 2022, the war in Ukraine for more than a month, which are backed with a severe humanitarian crisis, Africa is moving toward a destiny that is predicted to be enviable in many respects.
The prospects on the horizon are bright, from Africa's growing and vibrant youth population to initiatives like the African Continental Free Trade Area, the decade of women's financial and economic inclusion, and the African Union's bold vision for the future, Agenda 2063.
Africa is rightly considered the cradle of humanity, the origin of many people, languages, religions and traditions. A picture that occurs data such as the GDP per capita, the lowest in the world. Its development depends on the ability to transform its natural resources, a challenge for a new Africa, as Musa Faki Mahamat calls it.
The African Union has declared 2022 the year of food security and nutrition. The Pan-African Organization aims to eliminate hunger and food insecurity on the continent by 2025. From 2014 to 2020, figures of the African Union on malnutrition indicated a 14% jump in this scourge, or 221.6 million people exposed to food insecurity. Let's follow this report.
The African Union has declared 2020 the year of food security and nutrition. The Pan-African Organization aims for the elimination of hunger and food insecurity on the continent by 2025. In 2021, African states adopted a common position on the urgency of the fight against hunger in the Horn of Africa region and the Sahel in particular. The transformation of the agricultural sector has been identified as the main driver of food security in Africa.
In agriculture health, nutrition, and education to reduce vulnerability and build households' resilience to withstand shocks. There is clearly an urgent need for a bold transformation of agri-food system to be more efficient, inclusive, resilient.
Although food insecurity is a reality on the continent, it remains more linked to the poor use of available foodstuffs than to their absence, a paradox to which the African Union and its continental partners wish to oppose a new paradigm, that of an Africa which itself takes on the responsibility of revitalizing the food and agricultural sector for the political and economic independence of the continent.
The world takes account for. In fact, there is data that shows that Africa is actually the largest exporter of citrus fruits to the world. We have enough citrus fruit to feed the world, yet the perception is that we still can't feed ourselves.
In Africa, where 30% of the population faces food insecurity, specialists are proposing a U-turn in people's feeding habits. They advocate for a reconciliation with traditional African gastronomy, whose main ingredients are easily accessible. Dishes that are today relegated to the background in favor of culinary models imported from the West, notably.
We have a diversified diet, and we support everyone in this endeavor, and so that we can be able to overcome all the challenges at hand, because indeed we do have the solutions in our midst.
Substantial change is needed to ensure Africa's nutrition resilience. From 2014 to 2020, African Union figures on malnutrition indicated a 14% increase of the phenomenon, with 221.6 million people exposed to food insecurity. Children are the most affected by food insecurity, with visible consequences on their physical and mental growth.
The African Union organized from May 25 to 28, 2022, an extraordinary summit in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea. Several heads of state and governments, including the host president of Equatorial Guinea, Teodoro Obiang Mambasogo, took part in this event. Several topics were discussed, including the humanitarian situation in Africa, terrorism, and the unconstitutional changes of government on the continent. More in this report. From May 25 to 28, 2022, several African heads of states and governments gathered in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea, for an extraordinary summit convened by the African Union. Discussions centered around Africa's humanitarian situation, terrorism, and unconstitutional changes of government on the continent.
La solution, c'est à nous de l'apporter. Nous devons nous autonomiser, avoir le courage, nous doter du courage nécessaire pour trouver des solutions à nos problèmes. Nous devons de trouver des solutions aux conflits armés, parce que ces conflits armés provoquent différents types de situations dont pâtissent nos populations.
The COVID-19 pandemic, the war in Ukraine, growing insecurity, climate change, natural disasters, political instability have worsened the humanitarian situation in Africa, leading to alarming forced displacements.
Selon le rapport des Nations Unies 2021 sur l'aperçu de la situation humanitaire mondiale, 6 parmi les crises les plus importantes et aux conséquences humanitaires alarmantes se trouvent en Afrique, avec plus de 30 millions de personnes déplacées, de réfugiés et de demandeurs d'asile. Le triste sort de ces millions de personnes, hommes et femmes de tous âges, démunis et sans espoir, interpelle nos consciences et notre humanité.
During the deliberations, several countries announced their contributions to support humanitarian actions on the continent.
Nous avons eu hier près de 174 millions de dollars. Ce n'est qu'un début, parce que les défis sont énormes. On a beaucoup. L'Afrique, malheureusement, a la moitié des personnes déplacées et réfugiées au monde. C'est pas normal. Donc, nous comptons sur chacune et chacun pour apporter sa contribution, encourager aussi qu'on puisse encore avoir beaucoup plus d'argent. Et comme a dit Madame Diop, la priorité sera accordée aux filles et aux femmes.
At the end of this extraordinary summit, African governments reaffirmed their commitments to improving the humanitarian, security and political situation on the continent through increased assistance to displaced persons, strengthening the fight against terrorism and climate crisis in order to achieve the Africa we want. And on to our news and brief for this edition: harmonization of seed regulatory frameworks in Africa to boost intra-African agricultural trade.
Harmonization of seed regulatory frameworks to boost intra-African trade in agricultural products was the focus of the consultative meeting for the integration of advanced genetic improvement innovations into national agricultural investment plans in Nairobi, Kenya on May 17, 2022. The meeting was organized by the Agricultural Union Commission Directorate of Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy and Environmental Sustainability. With the launch of African Continental Free Trade Agreement, member states are expected to enjoy greater market access for seed trade. This is expected to facilitate the cross-border movement of seeds, improve farmers' livelihoods, national economies, and food and nutrition security in Africa.
And launch of a survey to promote the inclusion of young people and their active participation in African Union processes.
Dubbed the African Union Youth Survey, the study is part of an effort to increase the participation of the continent's youth in the development of policies and recommendations that address key issues affecting them. According to the African Union Youth Envoy, the rollout of this survey provides an opportunity to listen, engage and synergize efforts to better serve youth under the leadership of the chairperson of the African Union Commission. The result of this survey should further contribute to the development of meaningful youth-led programs and plans of the African Union towards the realization of Agenda 2063. Africa has the youngest population in the world, with more than 400 million young people between the age of 15 and 35.
And finally, the African Union Advisory Board on Corruption changes its name.
The African Advisory Board on Corruption has been given a new identity as the African Union Advisory Board Against Corruption. The announcement was made during the 40th ordinary session of this organ of the African Union held from 16 to 20 May 2022. This session was aimed at deliberating on the strategic direction of the Council in order to strengthen the fight against corruption on the continent. The African Union Advisory Board on Corruption plays a key role in promoting and encouraging the adoption of measures and actions by state parties to the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption. Currently, 47 countries have ratified the convention and are state parties to it.
In view of the realization of the African Union's Agenda 2063, a high-level meeting on the financing of the Pan-African Organization will be held from the 13th to the 14th of June 2022. It will be held under the theme Beyond the COVID-19 Pandemic and the Conflict in Ukraine, Building Resilience in African Economies and Financial Sustainability of the African Union. This meeting represents a concerted effort by member states to ensure that the African Union is funded in a sustainable, predictable, and accountable manner. The African Coalition for Global Action Against Poverty will celebrate the 32nd edition of the World Day of the African Child on the 16th of June 2022. The objective of this day is to advocate with African states and governments to limit the use of children for begging and the eradication of forced labor, human trafficking, and modern child slavery. The member states of the African Union will celebrate the International African Women's Day on the 31st of July 2022. This day aims to affirm the role of women's organizations for the political freedom of Africa and to promote the economic and social status of women on the continent. This Pan-African Women's Day will be celebrated and observed in all African Union member states' capitals with national programs and various activities. The Extraordinary Summit of African Head of State on Industrialization and Economic Diversification of Africa will be held from the 20th to the 25th of November 2022 in Niamey, Niger. According to the African Union, the summit aims to underline Africa's renewed determination and commitment to industrialization as one of the central pillars for achieving the continent's economic growth and development objectives.
Since November 2021, Chido Mpemba has revealed herself to Africa as the emblematic figure for raising the voice of African youth. The Zimbabwean elected Special Envoy on Youth at the African Union Commission intends during her mandate to facilitate the integration of young people in the decision-making process towards the realization of the African Youth Charter and Agenda 2063. More about Chido Mpemba in this report.
Having started her mandate on November 1st, 2021 with the African Union Commission, as Special Envoy for African Youth, Chido Mpemba continues to multiply actions to make African youth less vulnerable to climate change. The initiation of programs aimed at reducing the youth unemployment rate while encouraging entrepreneurial development on the continent is also one of her priorities.
Now I represent the continent of Africa for all youth-related matters as I sit in the office of the African Union Commission Chairperson as the youngest diplomat in ensuring that I represent the voices of 55 member states of young people across Africa.
Of Zimbabwean nationality, her appointment as Special Envoy for African Youth allows her to raise the voice of the continent's youth and to make young people's concerns heard by the decision makers of the Pan-African institution. As a current priority, Chido Mpemba wants the involvement of young people in development and the creation of tangible solutions aimed at resolving the various crises the continent is facing.
My mandate is to make sure that they're represented and to make sure that we create spaces for intergenerational dialogue and co-leadership. And such a timeless moment as we have the African Union Head of State Summit, where I get to also attend and ensure that I speak on behalf of the African youth across the continent.
Chido Mpemba is the youngest diplomat of the African Union Commission, a qualification which also serves as an asset within the institution to bring young people to support and promote positive social change, intergenerational dialogue, and concrete actions for the development of Africa as underlined by the Agenda 2063.
Thank you for watching the African Union Journal. Stay tuned for more programs on Africa 24.